a biblical perspective on life, culture, and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, today we are going to be talking about homeschooling. Homeschooling is growing in Australia as a vested interest. There are an estimated 43,000 legally registered homeschool students in Australia now, and the number continues to grow. And our very special guest today is the founder of the Kingdom Thinkers Academy, with a groundbreaking first for Australian Christian homeschoolers. Kneale is a former drummer in a Christian band called New Empire. A rock star he was. He's now the founder of Kingdom Thinkers Academy, as I said, and he aims to integrate a biblical worldview into education. His experience as an educational leader revealed the growing politicization of curriculum and the decline of a biblical understanding of the world in schools. And he believes this has harmed students' moral and spiritual growth. So he created the Academy to provide global education centered on biblical themes, equipping educators, parents, and students to defend their faith and nurture critical thinking. So Kneale, I want to welcome you into the studio today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Mate, I've never met a rock star turned educator before, and I am fascinated, Kale, so I want to drill down into that right now. Were you an educator, then a rock star, or were you a rock star, then an educator?
It's such a great question. It actually started that I was playing in the band and then decided to take on the degree of education at the time. And so for a long time there, I was actually living two parallel lives where, we'd be on the road, I'd come back, I might do a casual day at a school, and then we'd take off again. And so in a lot of ways, the flexibility was great, but it did feel like some days you wake up and put the tie on. The other days, skinny jeans are on, and it's back to business. So it was a funny time, but I looking back, I'm very thankful that I was able to live both those worlds concurrently, because not everyone can do that, but it did certainly open my eyes to a lot of things.
Now, was this on the advice of a parent or a trusted friend or mentor who said, Kale, you better not put all your eggs in the music basket. Maybe you need to do a degree as well?
100%. Yeah. I had a lot of, valued people in my life at that time that, were guiding me down that direction, and there's a lot of wisdom in that. And so I'm thankful for that, that those people that even when I did take time off during studies, they were still there saying, when I realized I could defer and, come back to it at a certain time. And at that point in time, online education and university was just picking up. I thought, oh, this is brilliant. This solves my problem. I can get back in and finish the degree and, continue doing what we're doing. So, I think it was just the right time, technologically that allowed me to kind of manage and get back into it, finish it, and still be able to manage two things for a time.
Yeah. Were you touring overseas or just Australia?
We toured across Australia and overseas. So, that was fantastic.
Does New Zealand count as an overseas tour? Or?
Yeah, in my mind it does. Great place, New Zealand. We love playing in New Zealand.
Good people.
Yeah. So we got to travel around the world. And so, from a global perspective, just seeing different places, I'm so thankful for the avenue that provided me, because it has certainly impacted my views even in education, just seeing the world, meeting different people, having those conversations.
It's a cool name for a band, New Empire. I got to be honest with you, I've never heard of it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't good, because I'm a talkback guy. As a kid, I used to listen to talkback radio. I always liked talkback radio. But what was your highlight as far as best concert ever or best gig ever, or just something that really impacted you as a musician in that band, New Empire?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say there would definitely be multiple instances where, I was impacted in different ways. I think anytime you're able to play, to larger crowds, it has a certain feel and sense about it. What's interesting about that, I found that when the bigger the crowd was, the more isolated you almost felt, like disconnected. But then the shows that were a little bit smaller, there was almost more of a sense of connection. But I think in any event, it's probably come from reflecting upon that time that I feel like the most impact in my life has come, because I it wasn't until it finished up, at least in an active sense, that I realized the impact that it had on so many different people from everywhere. And at the time, sometimes you don't really realize that. But then when you look back and you think, wow, we were part of people's lives for quite a long time. And so that was special to me. And it's special to know that people still, might mention something like, hey, we played your song at our wedding, or, almost recently. So, those conversations still happen, but it's almost, I think, the lasting legacy and the beauty of music is that it lasts forever. And in some ways it still continues, it still does continue.
Yeah, so it's on Spotify, New Empire?
Yep, on Spotify, Apple Music, all streaming.
We've just given you a plug. I'm going to check it out, New Empire. I'm always looking for new music to train to. Like I said, I like having my Christian workout playlist on. Because these days, if you go to a gym, some of the music in gyms is just so full on. It's like nightclub music and, singing about stuff I don't really adhere to as a lifestyle choice. So I just like putting my little Bluetooth headphones on and just pumping out the Christian music and just getting in my own little world, my own little bubble, and just training and get out of there, because it's kind of gone that way now, hasn't it? Gyms are almost like, it's a real meeting place too, I think, gyms.
Absolutely. And it's just interesting. My own sort of way of, sometimes I like to listen to music playing, training. Sometimes it's, listening to a sermon or a podcast. I think it depends on the mood, but, it is nice to be fed when you can, especially through the medium of music. I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. But anyway, so we're out of the rock star phase now. I want to move on. So why did you choose education when you were doing this degree?
Another great question. Early on, growing up as a child, my mum used to say to me, you'd be a great school teacher. And I used to turn around and say, no way. I hate school. I'm not going back to school. I don't know what you're talking about. And so, very early on, she saw something, in the way that maybe I was interacting with other younger kids and just the disposition I had in that environment, and saw something. And then, it wasn't sort of realized until later in my life growing up and thinking about, okay, where do I want to go with this? But in a very cliche moment, I was on a holiday, a cruise holiday with my family. We stopped over in the Pacific Islands at one of these small islands, and I was playing soccer with the island kids, and it was literally that time where the clouds opened up, and I felt the Lord say, do primary school teaching. So it's something kind of you'd see in a movie, but that was real. And so I remember leaving that island going, I know exactly what I'm doing when I get back. And then as soon as we touched down, I got in contact with a mate who was already, I think, studying a primary education degree. And I said, send me the forms. Where do I sign up? And so I did it. And so it was almost a spiritual encounter, but very clear. And I knew from that moment that was what I was going to do.
And isn't that the sort of teachers we want? Because in the old days, teaching was seen as a calling, as more than just a job. It was something you did out of a passion or a sense of calling to train and raise up that next generation, which is such a biblical approach to education, isn't it? To think about the succeeding generations. And I think sadly there's a perception now that a lot of people do teaching because it's an easy degree to get into and it's a job and there's a lot of holidays and you just wonder how many people actually have that sense of calling. But so good to hear that you did have that sense of calling and you jumped in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's certainly something that, I look back and the decisions that I've made within the educational space has come from a place of, Lord, where do you want me to go with this? Do you want me to apply for this role? Is it my job to be in some sort of leadership position? Whatever it is, make it be less of me, more of you, put me where you need me to be. And so with that mindset and I guess being open to his leading, here we are today, all these years later.
It's amazing. And because you're not just a school teacher, you've actually now come up with your own academy, and we want to dig into that as well. The Kingdom Thinkers Academy. So why did you start the Kingdom whatever I just said then, forget it. The Kingdom Thinkers Academy, why did you start that and not just continue being a teacher and then one day become a department head and then one day maybe a vice principal and go down the normal career path? What inspired you to start the Kingdom Thinkers Academy?
Absolutely. I began teaching in various different school systems, and it wasn't until I was teaching in a top private school in Sydney that they, had their own particular framework of curriculum that they're working through. And this was, I guess, a Christian private school. And I began to become increasingly agitated with the worldview development that was happening. Now, whether or not they knew that was happening or they were doing it on purpose, I began to recognize that, hang on a minute, the framework in which this school and many others are operating in is actually developing worldviews for students. Now, what that worldview is, we could discuss that. But I began to become agitated with how I saw that happening and the different types of resources and things coming in, which led me to go, okay, well, maybe I need to do something about this. And there was that moment again, I think I was at the gym, and I asked the Lord, what do you want me to do about this? And it was go and do some further education, get some study. And so I ended up doing a master's. And so if you know me well, I'm not somebody that loves to do those types of things, but I felt the Lord say, go and do it. So I went and got a master's, and I thought, okay, this would be a way that I feel the Lord's leading me to bring some influence into that space to help with this worldview development or this issue that I felt was going on. Fast forward a little bit of time.
Well, can I ask you, where did you do the master's degree at?
That was at Curtin University.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
and what was it in?
International education.
Excellent, mate. Well done, by the way, for doing that. Feeling the call, but then actually jumping on it and doing something about it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Christians live in this sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, but this sort of sense of limbo and hope and, believing and thinking and dreaming, but never actually acting on their dreams and making things happen. It sounds like you're the sort of guy that just jumps on things and makes it work.
Yeah, I mean, and when it's the Lord and there's nothing really that can stop you. You go for it. So we found a way to do that, and so I was studying, still working at the time, and at that point in time thinking, okay, well, I started to actually get some ideas about what would be a good model or framework to roll out in a school setting. And so during that time, I developed a framework, and at that point in time, it was just in my head, and I thought, you know what, I think this could be a great idea that schools could roll out. Fast forward a little bit, COVID hits, the world sort of turned upside down, mandates come in, that threw a spanner in the works. I wasn't comfortable with the mandates for teachers and so forth, so I decided, okay, I was basically out of a job, moved back in with family, sitting there going, this can't be it. There's something that I feel that I need to be, the Lord's called me to do. What do I do? So it was literally, okay, well, with my two hands, let's start something. Let's just do it outside of the school system and start to put those ideas that was in my mind at the time onto, have something visual that people could connect with. And so that began Kingdom Thinkers Academy, where I thought, you know what, this could still be used in schools, even if I'm not in a school currently, or, even in the homeschooling space, here's a framework for families to use as well, and then probably even to churches as well. So it essentially forced me to, create something that I thought may have rolled out in schools initially, but, fast forward, we're in the homeschooling world. And then, you discover then that, okay, there's a need for some kind of framework and guidance around, well, what do parents do that aren't comfortable with their children in the school system? They still want to instill Christian values and biblical perspectives on things. And so that began the process of fleshing out, okay, well, here's what I can offer for families and even schools.
I love it. So you had some COVID creativity. Yeah, well, I've heard of COVID babies and COVID romances, but you had some COVID creativity. And so the $2.5 billion question is, so the Kingdom Thinkers Academy, it's a resource. Who is it helping the most now? Is it helping homeschoolers? Is it helping Christian schools? Like, where are you getting the most traction?
Yeah, it's interesting. When it first started, because of, it being, originally just the idea and the framework, it actually began as serving families in the one-to-one tuition space across Australia. So families that had students at school needing help, literacy and numeracy and so forth. That sort of kick-started the interaction with the broader community around Australia. And then slowly we reintroduced some resources for families to use. Most recently, we've just launched online classes, which start in term 4 this year. And that's an exciting moment because that's the time that I guess we really get to unpack what Kingdom Thinkers Academy is about in terms of our framework and roll that out with a small class to begin with. So that happened, and even before that, though, we had contact with families who were looking at that time for a complete homeschooling solution. And because, the KTA model wasn't fully up and running, I basically started sort of a sub-brand within the KTA business that, hey, why don't we offer some personalized projects for students, one-to-one attention, and develop these projects for them no matter where they are in the world. And so for families that were traveling at the time, it offered the best, I guess, solution for them, because we were able to create projects that met them where they were. We could even create them based on the locations they were visiting and traveling. And so that almost started its own variation of what's possible with KTA from a one-to-one perspective. And now, it's become time that, okay, there's still a growing need for more of a classroom or group approach to learning and education in the online space, which KTA is more tailored to facilitating at this point. So it's sort of been an interesting road of probably not the order I would have anticipated it to go in, but I feel like in many ways it's probably been the best order, just, because that's how God works. Always the way you least expect. But it's great to be in a position now where we have the services for families that, whether they're looking for the group thing or the one-to-one thing, we can provide it and guide them through and partner with them on this journey.
Awesome. So you really are empowering families to educate their children. I did read a stat, I think it was in the Sydney Morning Herald yesterday, it said there's just a massive exodus out of the state primary school system into private schools in the Sydney, in parts of Sydney, because there's lots of issues with state education at the moment, isn't there? Just the curriculum and even as a parent, I'm not an educator like you, but I had 3 kids through primary schools, and just watching the stuff they were learning, I felt it was so unnecessary, to try and make a 10 or 11-year-old child grapple with the concept of climate change, that potentially the planet's going to, cease to exist. Like, what a horrible thing to teach a child, and things about gender and sexuality. It's just, I believe there's so much unnecessary content in the modern curriculum, which, number one, doesn't help the child's development, but number two, it means that the curriculum is overwhelming for teachers and students. And so we now see Australian students aren't performing well on the world stage in maths, science, and English and all the traditional subjects because they're so busy doing other things as well. So it looks like state education really has some serious challenges for Christian parents, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And, and that's certainly, the state system is one thing. I think even in the Christian education space, it's another with, I think there's still a lot to be desired in terms of what does Christian education look like? What should it look like? Is it just the badge on the front of the school where, you learn, subjects in isolation, you have the chapel service on the Friday, attach a scripture to a lesson, and that's it? Or is it actually in the business of developing worldview in the students and creating an environment that isn't just focused on delivering lessons? Because that's what I think people just think. School, you deliver lessons, transfer of knowledge. Is it more about, or can it be more about, how do we create an environment that's going to facilitate worldview development? And that is a different approach to, I think, many of the modern and current, approaches to learning we're seeing, and the results are coming out through different standardized testing and things. There's not enough time being spent on, the basics, but then more importantly, how are we teaching the children to view the world, especially, in light of what Scripture says and from a biblical perspective.
So you've obviously worked in Christian schools. Do you believe that some kids today in modern Christian schools in Australia even are not getting a truly biblical worldview?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And it's not to say that the teachers are, not doing their best in that. I think there's just a lack of understanding of how best to roll something like this out, particularly when the requirements and the strain on teachers to cover X, Y, Z and the curriculum and the overcrowdedness of it, that, a lot of teachers don't know or where to begin. So, my thinking was, well, to bring about this I guess it is seen as being a radical change, because to employ my framework in a school, you'd have to go back down to the basics. You have to strip everything away. Now, are schools willing to do that? Probably not. Is there potential for it to work in maybe some newer schools? Okay, there might be some space there, but I think that something drastic needs to happen for it to change. And change in schools is a slow process.
Yeah.
But this space in the homeschooling world, hey, we can do it now. And
it's a bit more fluid and dynamic, isn't it?
That's right.
So we're going to open up the talkback lines now. Maybe you've got a comment or a question. I'd like to ask you, if your kids are in Christian education, in Christian schools, do you believe they're being given a Christian worldview, a biblical worldview? Are you satisfied with the Christian education that your child is receiving in a Christian school? Or did you choose to put your child in a state school on purpose because you didn't want them to be too isolated from the world and you want them to understand how people think? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. You can call us on 1-800 316 316, or you can even just send us a text message on 0447 488 316. That's 0447 488 316, or send us a message on Instagram or Facebook. We'd love your engagement, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts and your experiences with your children's education, either in a Christian school or maybe in a homeschooling environment or a state school. But are you satisfied that your child has a biblical worldview?
Vision.
I believe the gospel of Jesus Christ is the only message that can bring true hope. Hi, I'm Pastor Matt Prater, and in partnership with Vision Christian Radio, I'd love to bring a ministry team to your community. My team will go to the outback or to the city to visit churches, schools and youth groups. We can also do street evangelism, seminars or special retreats. Plus, we'll bring Vision promo gear and copies of the Word for Today and V180 magazine to give away. Click contact at vision.org.au to register your interest.
Just another way Vision is helping you look to God daily.
Katoomba Christian Convention is all about bringing you life-changing Christian events and solid Bible teaching that helps you grow your faith. But now, with the KCC One app, you can experience the impact of KCC events every day. Stay up to date with all the events happening at Katoomba Christian Convention. Enjoy daily encouragement and never miss another talk from the speakers you love again. Download the KCC One app from your app store or head to kcc1.org.au. Station sponsor.
It takes a big family to keep Vision on the air across Australia. Individuals, churches and businesses. Like Everett Butchers. Shop 14 at the Woolworths Complex, Kalgoorlie Central.
Life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision.
Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of 2020, and I hope your day is going well. If you've just joined us, we are talking about Christian education in Australia, and I'm asking the question, is your child receiving a biblical worldview? Is your child or your children in a Christian school? Are they in a state school? Are they being homeschooled? Are you satisfied with the level of education? I think that the thing I don't understand about the modern world, Kale, is, and Donald Trump pointed this out in one of his election speeches, I think 7 years ago now, it's gone so quick, that America spends so much money on education, yet their outcomes are also fairly poor. And I think Australia must be up there. We must spend as much per child on education as almost any other nation, I think. And it's amazing also that our standards are also dropping. So we're asking callers to call us in on 1-800 316 316. Now, we do have a call, Ryan. Where did I get Ryan from? We got a call, Kale, from Belinda in Portland, Victoria. Are you there, Belinda?
I certainly am. Good morning to you both.
Good morning to you. Have you got a question or a comment for Kale this morning?
Well, I think I've actually got a comment because I used to teach religious education back in the day. I'm not going to say when. But when I was doing it, the concept of trying to teach children about God, you start at Easter time, which is really difficult. So you have to sort of smooth into it. And for children to understand, you know, that God is the Father and Jesus is the Son, I sort of went this way of saying, if we look at the word God, we could say he's a good old dad. I saw nothing wrong with that, but it was told to the principal and they actually asked me to leave the school. So I'm wondering, you know, what Christian what Christian values are children getting at school? If you can't say something so simple like that, to just say to little children in primary school, he is a good dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I've been listening and thinking, regardless of whether our children are getting Christian education, especially in a state school, I still think it's not what they need. You know, they need more from the school system to learn about the Lord. And I think that the school system is sneaking in a lot of what you guys are talking about with that, identity and things like that within the curriculum. If I had a child right now, to be honest with you, I would not send my child to any Christian school or any state school. I would prefer to homeschool them myself. That's why I just thought I'll call in and say, great work with what you're doing, because the world we live in is just getting out of control, and our children are subjected to so much. If I had a little person, I would be keeping them home with me.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that. I think it's a really good point you brought up, and I think even just the approach to Christian education, like you said, I mean, that situation there, sounds like a difficult one to be involved in. I think that, when you're talking about Christian education, my approach has been we shouldn't be leaving it just to the Christian studies or the biblical studies lesson that happens maybe once a week or twice a week, but that it becomes something that, and I'm talking about Christian schools, that it's an immersive experience, and it's about the environments that are being created in the classroom. Yes, lessons will be delivered on different things, but how are those environments creating the opportunity for those discussions to take place so that children can start to develop an understanding of the world, because they're all going to be coming from different homes and backgrounds and levels of understanding about God themselves. And so my approach was, well, let's theme based on 5 sort of propositions, basically. They're macro concepts that go from K to 12. And one of them, if I name them, the 5 of them: creation, in his hands, Alpha and Omega, in the world, not of it, and made in his image. And that is basically the framework in which schools could or can apply the key learning areas that they do from day to day into those themes to help develop an understanding of those themes in light of what's happening in the world. And they're on purpose to be a response to the things we're seeing. So, for example, made in his image theme, that's the response to the identity issues that we're seeing in society today. In the world, not of it. Well, that's a response to what does it look like to have biblical government, or a godly government with godly leaders. What do we do in the event of government, becoming tyrannical? In his hands, it's a response to the climate change agenda. Students being taught the world's going to end in 10 years, or do we have the authority of God's word that says, well, actually the seasons will continue. God is in control. And then creation, well, that's a big topic of origins, which is a big thing happening in schools. Christian schools, I don't think are teaching an orthodox, a biblical view on many of those issues in that theme. But if you can start by implementing some of those big picture ideas and allowing students the space to ask the questions, then that's where the growth occurs. Because outside of that, if it's segmented or isolated into a subject, it's disconnected from every other learning area that they're learning about. And so hence they're not really getting that holistic view of the world.
And that's right, because it just reminded me of one of the children that I had in class, and I always gave them a little book, so if they had any questions they wanted to know, they could write them down and I'd take it home with me and then bring it. And I remember one of the little boys, he sat quite quietly, he didn't have a lot to say, and I asked him one day, "Are you okay?" And he said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "My mum and dad told me that you people that believe in God are weird." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, my parents told me that you are weird because you go to a place where the door is usually shut and that you drink blood. And I had to explain to this poor little darling, no, the doors of the church are always open. It's just that you don't see them open, in the days of the week. And no, we definitely do not drink blood. Mm-hmm. And the concept of what some children are taught by their parents, it's just overwhelming when you think about these poor little babies that know nothing of the Lord. Mm. No one's going to tell them. Mm-hmm. And they have, thoughts like that, where that little boy was actually scared of me.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy times. That's obviously some parents there with some serious bias there, I suggest, against Christianity. But maybe also from a Catholic background where they're taught that, the bread and the wine are literally the body and the blood of Jesus. And maybe that's where that came from, a bit of Chinese whispers. But, Belinda, really glad you called in. We're about to go to the national news, but we just really appreciate you calling in and joining the conversation. I'm getting heaps of text messages, which is great. We're going to read them out after the news. Kale, I want to welcome you back into the studio here on 2020 Today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, you were the drummer in New Empire. Why is it, Kale? I know you're biased, but I'm going to put it out there. Why are the drummers always the cool guys in the band?
I don't know. Maybe, yeah. It's interesting. It's a great instrument, and people are drawn to great instruments like the drums. Like myself, I mean, yeah. I don't know what to say about that.
I'm thinking it's because the drummers have always got guns because they're just banging away. It's like they're like the Rocky in the band, aren't they? They're working so hard, they're sweating. They normally got a tank top on.
That's right. They hold it all together. There's something in that. And so, it's funny. When we actually started, we did play a few different instruments, and it was almost like musical chairs. At one point, it just stopped, and I found myself on the drums. I thought, okay, I guess this is where it stops.
I'm sure you did it well, mate. You did it well. Now, Kat, we've had so many text messages come in. We're going to get to them very shortly. We've also got a caller waiting, so his name's Graham. But I just want to remind our listeners that if you want to text us as well and join the conversation through text, and I'm loving all these text messages, the number is 0447 488 316. We're talking Christian education, and we are going to get onto an initiative that you are facilitating for the International Justice Mission. Briefly tell us what that is that you're facilitating for them.
Absolutely. So they've created a wonderful resource that aims to teach children how to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly, based on Micah 6:8. And so when they approached us to facilitate these learning materials, we thought, well, brilliant. What a great way to act as an extension of what we do as an academy through our different educational services, where, we have students engage in things that are happening around the world that are real, that maybe aren't really being spoken about or covered in schools. I'm not sure. But the opportunity to do that made sense because, we asked the students to think about what's evil in culture that we can curb. Well, this was an initiative that we had to, we felt we needed to partner with.
Because IGM, that's International Justice Mission, they're obviously helping people in slavery, whether child slavery or sexual slavery or just slavery. Labour slavery is becoming a big issue in the world today. So did they come up with that material in response to modern-day slavery?
That's right. And so, the initiative is something that they want to roll out in schools, I think, eventually down the road. But as it is something that's happening and is very active in the world today, unfortunately, the more they can do to partner with educational institutions to, engage with students about what is actually happening, I think is a great thing. I had conversations with some of my students saying, hey, do you know that the idea of modern slavery, it still exists? And a lot of them don't necessarily know that it's still happening or even the forms of it, particularly forced scamming is a big one. And so it's a great opportunity for students to learn about those types of forms of slavery because they are prevalent, they're happening. And so IJM is in that space helping rescue people caught up in those
Yeah,
environments.
and Kingdom Thinkers Academy is now facilitating the material. Now, we do have a caller called, his name's Graham from Tasmania. And Graham, just hold the line there. We've got 4 text messages. I just want to address 2 of them. The first one is from Maddie. Maddie, thank you so much for texting us. She says, hi, as a teacher in the public system, Kale, what are the differences in working for KTA compared to the public schooling system?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It all comes down to, I guess, the way that you view the world. And so if you're a Christian, somebody who follows Jesus, you have a worldview. And I'll just say everybody has a worldview. And that's something that for KTA, for teachers that have come on alongside and are working with us, we obviously would expect they align with the values and the beliefs about the world based on the Bible. And so everything we do, from teaching science, English, different forms of literature, is centered around immersing students with that bigger picture thinking, as opposed to, hey, let's just, focus on delivering lessons and isolating subjects. We go to the 33,000 foot perspective and go, what does God think of this issue? And so when that's the starting point, the learning takes on a whole new approach when it's not something that's just specifically on getting through lessons, because you got to get through the lessons and tick the boxes and meet requirements and things. So that would be a big difference. I think worldview is key, and alignment of that within the school. That's really important.
Love it. Good answer, mate. And thank you so much, Maddie, for sending us that message. Now, there's a really good one from Tanya. It says, hey, Tanya here. I so relate to what your guest is saying. I was the only one who didn't succumb to the pressure of COVID. I left the education system after 20 years. I've just recently started relief teaching in a beautiful Christian school. I'm definitely not satisfied with the curriculum being fed to our students, even in Christian schools. It's very close to the government schools. The woke agenda is being pushed on those schools externally too. My son is in middle school, is an only child, and awake to the woke agenda. Good for him. However, he's still being bombarded on quite a few angles too. I'd love to hear more about this academy. And that was Tanya. Tanya, thank you for that comment. I think, Kale, this is a good time just to push your website, mate. What is your website if people want to get in touch?
Yeah, get in touch, www.kingdomthinkersacademy.com. There you can get in contact with me personally, contact us, and you have access to a variety of the other different educational services we provide.
Thank you for the comment, Tanya, and sounds like you're doing a great job as a mum as well. But we'll go to Graham now. Graham is calling all the way from Tasmania. Graham, have you got a question or a comment today?
Well, basically what I'm like to say is that our schools, the Western so-called colleges and such forth, in the last 70-odd years or more, they've been dumbing down the nation, dumbing it down, rejecting God. And those young people 60 or 70 years ago are our teachers and in our parliament today. So that's why they've got all this business going on, of rejection of God. A new world order, I think it was the EU talking the other day about new world order and trade and, people getting along with each other. Now, that's a sign of very shortly that we will have a new world order, which they've been working for. And Scripture says they'll look for the Bible, be that no knowledge of the Bible, because it'll be dumbed down that much. Someone will give you the Bible and say, explain this to me. And you'll say, I'm not taught. I don't understand what's in there.
Absolutely. Graham, you make a really important point, and I 100% concur with you. Have you got a response, Kale, for Graham?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you make a really good point, Graham. It's and that's where Christian education, God's been kicked out of every area in the school system and even in society. And so we have a generation of students growing up not knowing, well, the biblical literacy is very low. And, you look at any of the major statistical, the data out there, George Barna's a good one from the US. The numbers are striking with the amount of biblical illiteracy. And so, the schools have a part to play in that, particularly the Christian schools. And so that's, why KTA exists, is to instill and bring back the focus on, well, what does God think about these issues? And you make, all those, and even on those topics of the New World Order and all that kind of stuff happening with the UN, yes, how do we connect that and have those discussions with children in light of what the Bible says is going to be happening before Jesus comes back? It's a great point.
Awesome. Hey, Graham, we want to thank you so much for calling. We've got so many text messages we want to address as well, but thanks for calling, and you have a wonderful day down there in Tasmania, okay?
Thank you.
See you, mate. Kale, the text message board is lit. I'm loving this.
Great.
We're getting so many texts. I'm going to read out another one to you. Hi, Kale. We Christian homeschooled our daughter for a time using the ACE curriculum. I'm sure you're familiar with the ACE curriculum. I'm not, but I'm guessing you are. She is now 20 and about to do accountancy at uni. So that was Mike Flood just wanting to let us know that they homeschooled their daughter using ACE. What's your thoughts on ACE?
Yeah, I haven't used it myself. I know that it's been going for quite a while. And, many families have used that. I certainly think there are lots of viable options for families in terms of what can be accessed and used from a homeschooling perspective. I think where the gap is more of an Australian-based offering that's not American, because obviously America, bigger market with everything they have there, and a lot of families do use those materials. But that's great. Yep, I know some people that have gone through ACE. Our approach is different. I mean, we are more inquiry-based, project-based, which, will still cover those key skills and areas for development. But, you find what works for you, and if it works, you stick with it and don't change it.
Well, it sounds like KTA is a great option, though. And here's another one. We've got, hi, I work in a Christian school. And another one just came through, and I'm really relieved that there is a local school that prioritizes God's word. My husband and I would not send our children anywhere else. I don't think it's isolating. Our children can't escape the world, regardless of where you send them for school. We heavily support Christian education. And that was Caitlin. Caitlin, thank you so much for that. You got a response for Caitlin there, Carl?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are great Christian schools out there. I mean, no way, demonizing the things that are happening, because there are. And they're great teachers working in those spaces and, preaching God's word. So that's a wonderful thing. And it's good to hear that, that they exist and parents are having the benefits of them.
And Caitlin, thank you for that text message. If you want to send us a text as well, 0447 488 316. That's 0447 488 316. Or you can contact us through Facebook or even Instagram, or call us on the Dog and the Bone on 1-800 316 316. Now, here's another comment. I've taken my older daughter out of Christian schooling as it did not feel like a Christian environment. Subjects are not taught from a biblical worldview, and teachers are certainly under pressure to meet state curriculum requirements. I've seen a decline in what their core skills, such as spelling and maths, are because the curriculum is too full. I'd love to see a comprehensive Christian curriculum available for homeschoolers that helps make it manageable for those new to homeschooling. That was an anonymous one, but Kale, have you got a response for our anonymous texter there?
Yes, so KTA's online classes aims to fill that gap, and so we look at what is in the curriculums, and depending on what state you're in and whether that state's using the Australian curriculum, we have an understanding of what is typically being taught and the topics. And what we aim to do is go, okay, well, for registration requirements for a number of families, they need to show that they're ticking those boxes. So we aim to say, yes, we know what those outcomes are. Our approach is we look at that and say, well, if we're going to learn about, say, the Renaissance, Year 8 topic, history, we're going to tackle that from a biblical perspective, zoom out what was happening at the time, and that's what we're actually looking at term 4, and we're going to bring in the Pilgrim's Progress to give a bit more context around John Bunyan and what was happening in that time. So help is here. I know that there's been a bit of a gap in that space, but that's the balance to go, okay, for families that still need that registration requirement in the homeschooling space, but also the freedom and the space to actually discuss those things openly and freely.
Very, very good answer, Kale. I've got to say, I'm very impressed by your answering skills, my friend. Here's another one. G'day, listening in Tasmania. Yes, homeschool is excellent. I know from experience that woke leftist immoral stuff is creeping into Christian schools. Lots of good stuff happening, but as parents, we have been concerned and often not listened to by staff. Great conversation. Cheers. Rob in Tassie. Rob, thank you for that comment. Kale, you got a response for Rob in Tassie?
Yeah, it is very true. It's happening. I think part of the problem is a lot of the resources teachers are accessing, are created by those with a particular worldview that are pushing these agendas. So it's almost impossible to escape it. There's a lot of soft policy pushing through UN. They're pushing resources out there, partnering with different organizations that are, being, the sort of top 5 places teachers go to teach different topics. And so when that's happening, that's why we're seeing the development of worldview from either a globalist or a secularist perspective. So it's a very real thing. And I wish and I hope that more teachers can be aware of where those resources are being developed and what's driving them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope more and more people after today's conversation go to Kingdom Thinkers Academy too, Kale, to check out your curriculum. Here's another one. I've never seen so many text messages, Kale. Do you always attract this many text messages?
It's so funny. Entering this space and putting it out there and getting feedback from people, it's a hot topic. And I have seen that even from Christian teachers when I put some word out that I was looking for some more teachers to work in this space. It was the most clicked and interacted ad that I've ever had. So that says something.
Yeah, I mean, and anyone who's concerned about kids' education, be it a parent or a teacher, this is something that is really important because we're all just watching modern education in Australia. It doesn't seem good from a Christian perspective. Here's another one. Good morning. In the last 4 years, our kids have been in state Christian and now homeschool. My husband teaches year 6 at the Christian school our kids used to attend. We're definitely noticing a change in our kids' behavior and influences. We definitely are happy with Christian compared to state school. But I also notice the difference in the conversations we have with our 3 young boys at home about all kind of things in life and also things related to God. We have time and energy for those now, along with catching the kids up with certain things they struggle with. And that's Deborah. Deborah, thank you so much for that comment. Have you got a response to Deborah, Kale?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's wonderful that in that space now you have that time to be the lead figure and, take back the time that is normally spent, influencing your kids in those spaces. So, the great thing about homeschooling is you are the driving narrative and voice in their lives when these questions come up, because they are going to come up. And so it's a great thing to have, that influence. What a better thing. We can't expect to send our kids to school and come back sort of living great Christian lives. I mean, that should be ultimately the role of parents, and then in partnership with good Christian schools. So I'm great. I'm really thankful that's happening for you guys.
Awesome, mate. Here comes another. They're rolling through, mate. More and more are coming through. Hi, Vision family. God bless you richly. I have a 6-year-old in public school. The school does have a program where Christianity is discussed, which is great. Yet I strongly believe, as a mother, that her inner world, my child's inner world and worldview, is primarily impacted by our Christian home values and church fellowship, along with Christian cell group and kids programs they attend at church. I think we as parents cannot and should not fully remove her from the public school, as she needs to understand the world in which she lives. We begin our day praising God, and things like that reinforces her identity in Christ. When gender issues arise, I explain that we as a Christian do not believe this, and that our understanding of the world comes from God and His Word in the Bible. Thank you for allowing a platform to discuss this today. So thank you so much for that comment. I don't think there was a name on there, but really appreciate that comment. Kale, have you got a response for that one?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful that, you're having those open conversations. And, I guess I could only say, that's a interesting space to be in, especially as your child grows and develops. And so I'm sure you'll navigate those decisions with their education moving into the future with the Lord's help. So bless you.
Yeah. 6 is good. A 6-year-old is good, but I'll tell you what, they're more challenging when they're 16, that's for sure, regardless of where they are.
Yeah.
Because, the challenge for today, as you know, Kale, it's phones.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what school they're in, if they're homeschooled, if they're just not even in school. Those phones just open up a whole ugly world to children and teenagers today.
Yep.
And it's just so every parent I know that's had real issues with their children, especially teenagers, it's phone related. You know, it doesn't even matter what school they go to. It's just those silly phones.
Yes. There's just, and it's, they have access to the world's information at their fingertips. And so, you know, how that's managed, I know families that hold out with the age in which their children have phones, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I know for my little boy, he's not going to get a phone until he's, as long as we can.
34.
Yeah, 34. There we go.
Okay, we've got a couple more comments. We want to get through these texts because they're coming through. I'm an early years educator at a kindergarten level. We desperately need you, Kale, and the Kingdom Thinkers Academy. Well done. I'll be joining your organisation as an educator member if that is offered. Thank you so much for this topic and the interest in educating us. And that's from Bernie. Bernie, thank you for that comment. Carl, you got a response for Bernie?
Yeah, thank you, Bernie. I would love to have you on board. Get in touch. We're looking for a lot of the response I had initially when we announced that we were running classes was from the K to 2 space. It's not my area of expertise, but I'm looking for educators that are wonderful in that space and have a biblical perspective on all things.
And here's another one, Cal. I'd love to homeschool, but I don't have time to scratch myself as it is. Instead, I talk to my children about the globalist agenda, the UN, climate change and scams, etc. I'm trying to teach my kids to be critical thinkers. And that's Tim. That's awesome, Tim. I'm not going to let you respond to that, Cal, because we're moving through here. Next one. I homeschooled my son, and then I sent him to a Christian school for half a year. I was so dissatisfied with the school, I pulled him out and never looked back. He has done an apprenticeship and is just married at 26 years old. The Kingdom Academy definitely looks like a great thing for schooling today, and that's Jenny. Jenny, thank you so much for that comment. Kale, have you got a response for Jenny?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great to hear, Jenny. And it's, I think that in this space, the more I'm working with students and families that want their children to be independent thinkers and, go after those desires the Lord's put on their heart, they're finding success. School is not the thing that determines whether or not you're going to be successful. Giving them the environment, the opportunity to pursue what they feel that the Lord has for them in life, that's where the success will be.
Awesome. And the last comment for the day, and thank you so much to everyone that texted us today, is Tony. And Tony is saying, be great to see overseas teachers if online. Some of these guys are on fire too. I'll be praying for you. And that's Tony to you, Carl.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, absolutely. We actually have one of our teaching members is based in India. Lovely lady. And she's going to be joining, and I look forward to bringing on more educators from around the world because we can, and we'll make the most of that.
So good, mate. I just want to touch on, before we finish up today, Kale, the IJM curriculum that you're facilitating. What does that look like? How long does it last for? If someone wants to incorporate that into their homeschooling, tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for students to become engaged in this 4-part series. And so we thought, well, let's not limit it to homeschoolers by just having it during the daytime. Let's put it in the evening. So it's going to run across the month of November once a week. I think it's looking like around 7 o'clock, on Tuesdays, for example. And the series will cover, session 1 will be on acting justly, session 2, love mercy, session 3, walking humbly, and then session 4, we're going to have a special guest from the front lines from IJM Philippines, David Wilkinson, join us to answer questions students have about the topics that we discuss over that month. So it's going to be a great chance. It's free for high schoolers to join. I have 2 wonderful educators who are going to be facilitating that learning and taking the students through, the activities and the discussions. So would love to see as many students in that high school age group join. And you can do that by jumping onto iprojectinternational.com and signing up.
Kneale, you've been the best guest today. I mean that. I mean, not only are you good looking, not only are you polite, you love the tea I made you. I mean, I've got no faults I can pick up on. You're like a perfect man in the studio today, and you've developed, former rock star, but you've developed the Kingdom Thinkers Academy. Now, if anyone listening right now wants to connect to the Kingdom Thinkers Academy, it's simple. It's kingdomthinkers.com. thinkersacademy.com. Check it out. There's some great material on there. I love that IGM initiative in November, that once a week at 7 o'clock, once a week. That's a great initiative for kids to understand modern slavery, what that looks like, how we can even potentially help. But Kale, Kneale, I want to thank you so much for joining us live in the studio today on 2020 at Vision Radio.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.